Hi Founder fans, Jason here, and today's founder is George Baylor. Now, by the time the Revolutionary War broke out, George Baylor was already known to most of the more famous founders, at least the ones from Virginia. And as such, when George Washington was appointed to command the Continental Army, George Baylor was one of his first aides-de-camp to help him run the war. Now, unfortunately, it was quickly deemed that, at least by George Washington, Baylor wasn't quite up to the task. And now, this wasn't because he was short as a military man. While we like to look at the revolutionaries who stormed the gates with George Washington, the Alexander Hamiltons and the John Lawrences, we like to think of them as valiant war heroes. And well, many of them were. According to George Washington, in a letter to Charles Lee about George Baylor, the problem was that to be an aide-de-camp successfully, you needed to be a good pen man. And unfortunately, although he was bright, George Baylor just wasn't the most eloquent of writers. Again, not to take anything away from the soldiers who were brave and fought valiantly in the American Revolution, but what Washington was looking for was someone who can communicate with their writing. And unfortunately, Baylor didn't fit that description. However, he was known to be an excellent horseman. And because of his equestrian skills, George Washington actually had him he was promoted to colonel and commanded a cavalry unit for several years in the Revolutionary War. Fortunately, by 1778, George Baylor was encamped with some of his men, and he was surprised by an outfit of British in New Jersey during the Forage Wars. Now, many of these men were killed, and the rest were taken captive, including Baylor, who had been stabbed by a bayonet before becoming captive. Fortunately, he would survive, and he would live out through the end of the war, but his wounds always haunted him. And by the time the war was over, Baylor had decided to take the recommendation of his physicians, which was sail to Barbados. At the time, many ailments were cured by going to better weather. Unfortunately for Baylor, this didn't seem to work, and he was in Barbados when his affliction overcame him, and he died, sadly, outside of the country that his efforts helped found. Now, as for the attack by the British on Baylor, that became known as the Baylor Massacre. And, you know, whether or not it was is up for debate. They were just encamped, and the British jumped out and got them. But they called it a massacre, and the Patriots were very good at propaganda, and they used this as one of many, many examples of British aggression and British, low moral standings. And because of this, it helped to rally the troops who were already fighting, and it helped them recruit other soldiers to get through the remainder of the war. So that's the life of George Baylor and his part in the American Revolution. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit like. If you're new here, definitely subscribe. I put out videos 5 days a week, and tomorrow, like every Wednesday, we will have a live video. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with that live video tomorrow.